You are listening to the Huddle Up Podcast with Mile High Huddle's Chad Jensen and Zack Kelberman.
Freeman is back there, blocked by Leary, caught for the touchdown! A 2-yard laser! Fumangali from the University of Wisconsin. Third and goal at the 1. Lindsey is in. Janovich, the fullback. Janovich hit. Nice big hit there by Kendrick. He continues to dig. He's not. They call a touchdown. They call a touchdown on a 1-yard jump inside.
Trying to set up the screen to his tight end, Noah Fant. He's got some room to run. He cuts it back at the 10. Fant takes it in. Touchdown, Denver. The first NFL touchdown for the rookie tight end out of Iowa. End zone caught. Touchdown, Courtland Sutton. His 5th career touchdown, but his first here in Denver.
And now, here are Broncos country's football priests to help you exorcise the demons of another doomed season.
I have exorcised the demons. This house is clear.
Okay, and we are live. Welcome in, everybody, to the Huddle Up Podcast, presented, as always, by Mile High Huddle, powered by Overtime Media. I'm your host, Chad Jensen, and with me, as always, my partner in crime. You know him, you love him. He is Zack Kelberman, and he's been traveling, which is why we are slightly delayed tonight, getting his whole setup put together. And, you know, when you're on the road, you guys have seen me do the pod when I'm on the road at times. When you're on the road, you're kind of dependent on whatever your hotel's Wi-Fi is. So let's all cross our fingers and hope that Zach's Wi-Fi holds up. How's your trip gone so far, brother?
It's going well. My apologies, guys, for the late appearance tonight. It's like Chad said, I get the Wi-Fi set up, getting all my equipment set up for the podcast. It just took a little bit, but I'm glad to be on here. And it's nice to be in New York City. You know, it's a whole different environment here.
Yeah, that is, man. Anyone, I mean, as somebody who's truly from the West, the one time I've been to New York City, to me, it felt like I was on a different planet. It was so different, you know, because in the West, everything goes outward, right? It goes, you know, the city starts in the center, you got your main street, and it kind of goes out like this. And not that it doesn't do that back east, but in New York City, it blew my mind. Everything just stacked on top of it. They ran out of room to do this a couple hundred years ago. So now they just go up, you know, they just build up. And I'll never forget standing on the corner of a random street in Manhattan and looking all 4 ways of the compass, as far as my eye could see, skyscrapers just as far as you could see.
There really is no – I'm not going to get all on a tangent about New York City, but there really is no place like it, Chad, in the entire – I would say the world. I mean, I haven't seen the entire world, but there's just between the buildings here and just the hustle and bustle, there really is no place like it. So it's definitely an experience.
I want to get your thoughts here on what happened. Well, fortunately for Broncos fans who were, you know, tripping on it a little bit, you don't have to worry about Pat Shurmur going anywhere, because obviously that job, he passed on it. He let him know, hey, I'm happy. I'm staying where I'm at with the Broncos. And the job went to Mel Tucker of CU. And that's basically been what's lit up Denver, especially sports talk radio, Twitter especially as well. Today is the way that Mel Tucker left all his new recruits and his team and CU hanging. This isn't a CU podcast, but it does affect the Broncos because everyone was worried that maybe Pat Shurmur was going to get caught up in that and get, you know, drawn away from Drew Lock and all that. Even though we weren't too worried about it just because of what we had been hearing. And even if he did leave, you still have Mike Shula. But nevertheless, that ship has sailed, Zach.
Yeah, and you know what? We talked about this on the last pod, Chad, that it's done, it's signed, sealed, and delivered. Shurmur is the coordinator, and yet he did draw some interest from Michigan State, but that's a good sign for the Broncos that their new coordinator was being hotly courted by another major program, an NCAA program, but he was never leaving. He said he's all in on the Broncos. He's met with the coaching staff already. So I like to hear that he's, you know, nothing's going to change his mind. He's all in with Drew Lock. He's all in with the Broncos. But to me, the fact that another program or football, whatever, wanted him as their head coach, it just is an important hire for the Broncos. It's a good look for them.
Guys, we want to talk about Shelby Harris. I want to start kind of getting down to brass tacks in terms of what it's going to cost or what it would cost to re-sign the big 4 free agents. But first, a couple of really quick matters of business. Guys, make sure you're following the show on Twitter, as you can see here, at Huddle Up Pod. Simply the best way to keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening with the show in real time. And then don't forget, you guys, head on over to the new merch store. As you can see right here, this hat. You can get one for yourself stitched, all right? It's nice. You got hashtag football priest. Geez, it's always reversed, so I have a hard time knowing where my finger's going. But as you can see, flat bill, flat brim, Broncos colors. This hat has been our number one bestseller so far on the merch store, and it was created, not only the hat, but the entire store, by your popular demand. It's easy to get to, huddleuppod.com. I'll put it in the comment stream so you guys can have an easy click and go check it out. We're continuing to add products. Like we've been telling you, we have teamed up with a guy who's going to be running this for us, adding products, taking care of each and every one of you when an order comes in, goes out, the whole 9 yards. We've been a little bit slower getting new products up than we would like because we got to take care of the content first, and that is writing articles at milehighhuddle.com, doing these podcasts, making videos. That comes first, but we are taking it seriously, and go check it out. And Zach, what we've seen so far is just a massive groundswell for this and the blue hoodie.
Yeah, I mean, we've gotten a lot of orders and interest with that. I mean, I have my own hat coming, I think, Friday, Chad. I'm excited to wear it as well. It's very well made. The stitching is very personalized for the hat for the brand. And, yeah, I mean, we've gotten a lot of feedback, all positive. And if you want to support the brand, go check out the store.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
And by the way, Stu, I just put an order in for you, buddy. You got a hat coming your way, so watch for it, probably first in next week. You might get it sooner than that. A hat and the blue hoodie is coming to you, buddy, for yes. Your support. We appreciate it.
Very well deserved.
Absolutely. But guys, let's turn the page real quick here. We see the super chats. Wow. Well, we can't wait on this one. Let me find it. Hold on. This is unbelievable. Christy from the top rope.
Thank you, Christy.
Huge donation.
Thank you.
For chat. $50. Christy, we appreciate you. Have we sent Christy a shirt before?
Yes.
All right. Christy, email us milehighhuddle@gmail.com and tell us what you like that's on the merch store right now. Let's get something sent out to you because
thank you so much.
You and Stu especially are our two biggest super chat superstars supporting the show. We love you. We appreciate you. Let's get to some content real quick here. First and foremost, Zach, what I wanted to touch on, then we'll get to the 4 free agents, the big 4 as I like to call them, was the tweet that came from friend of the show, Benjamin Albright, on the subject, and I see a couple of the other super chats. We'll get to you, I promise. Our friend of the show, Benjamin Albright, tweeting that the Indianapolis Colts have a legitimate interest, he's hearing, in Shelby Harris. And I don't think they're going to be the only team because, as we've talked about before, there is a lot to like about Shelby Harris. He hasn't reached that, no turning back point of 30. He's not over the hill yet. He's still 29, or he's going to be 29 when the football season starts. Spot Track has his cost or his expected market value hovering around $12 million per year. What are your thoughts on the Indianapolis Colts having interest, and what do you think that will do to any potential negotiations with the Broncos coming back?
Well, I mean, any team that's going to up the offer into the 12-13 range is going to put more pressure on the Broncos to meet that number. But knowing Elway, he has a number already in mind, and he's not going to come up to that. Shelby Harris would have to come down to that, and it's not probably going to happen. The Colts are a team that have a lot of salary cap space that are pretty much built to win now, and they need defensive help. They need a pocket pusher, and that's exactly what Shelby Harris is. I would expect him to get a ton of interest on the open market. He will. The Colts are just the first domino to drop as the rumors start to percolate here. But the more interest in him, it's just going to up his value more, and it's going to take him further away from the Broncos. It's looking like 12 is the baseline right now for Shelby Harris. I don't think Elway's going that high, Chad.
And again, I like Shelby Harris. Don't get me wrong. I'm not sure that he should go that high because Shelby Harris, the one thing that I continually have to come back to when I'm weighing pros and cons with regard to Shelby Harris, Zach, it's his ability to make that impact play in crunch time when the chips are down.
Yep.
And I can't think, aside from Von Miller, and it's honestly been a while since Von Miller's made a play like this, but aside from, let's just say, the Von Miller of old, I can't think of a current Bronco who has found a way to make game-changing plays in the clutch, of late anyway, like Shelby Harris has been able to do. No one else. There really hasn't been anybody. Von Miller, for whatever reason, basically the last 2 years, when the chips are down and you need that strip sack. I mean, if you think back to 2015, every time the Broncos needed a play, it felt like Von Miller was there. In the fourth quarter, boom, he'd make something happen, especially during that playoff run. been a long time, since he had a good 2016, good 2017. 2018 was a solid year for him too. I think 14.5 sacks, but still those game-changing plays have been few and far between. That's the one thing Shelby Harris brings to the table.
Right.
But again, he's just, for me, not quite consistent enough as both a run defender and a pass rusher to say, yeah, let's peel off $12 million, especially when you've got Derek Wolfe. And I want to get into some of the salary ranges where we can kind of project all these guys will land, but especially when you can get a guy like Derek Wolfe coming back at probably close to the same. It'll probably cost about the same to get Derek Wolfe back on an APY perspective, but at least Derek Wolfe is a fit and he thrives in Vic Fangio's scheme.
The only other one on defense as of late with that clutch gene would be Will Parks that I can think of, Chad. Other than that, though, like you said, there's been no one who stepped up to make a consistently big play in crunch time like Shelby Harris. That being said, I'm a big fan of Harris. I don't see the Broncos ponying up $13, $14 million for the reasons you mentioned. You have to pay Justin Simmons. You might bring back Derek Wolfe. And also the fact that you developed or drafted a guy in the second round, DeMarcus Walker. You drafted a guy in the third round, Draymond Jones. You have young guys waiting in the wings, and you want returns on those investments as well. So if you shell out 12, 13 for Shelby Harris, that pushes the other players down the depth chart. I'd rather the Broncos go a little younger and cheaper by having, let's say, Draymond Jones start, bring back Derek Wolfe on a 2-year deal, incentive-laden deal, and if a push comes to shove, let Shelby Harris walk. I like him a lot. I think he's a really good impact player, but the interest he's getting and the price range that he wants, and he admitted that this is his first foray into free agency. It's probably the best shot at the open market he's going to get in his career. 13, 14 is a little too rich for my blood. Love the guy, but I don't see the Broncos shelling out that time.
Yeah, I mean, right now I'm looking at. Hold on one second, Zach. Keep. Actually, no. I'm having a dog attack. Bear with me 1 second here, you guys. I don't want that coming through.
Well, while you do that, I want to address one thing in the comments that said 3 people apparently think I tweeze my eyebrows, and I can promise you guys I don't do that. So I'll take it as a compliment, but nope, I don't do that.
All right, sorry about that, you guys. All right, I want to touch on really quick. No, what self-respecting man tweezes his eyebrow? I'm sure there's some of you out there that do it, but my wife probably wishes I did. Well, actually, I don't think she does wish that I did, to be honest with you. That would be weird. Let me get to salaries real quick on the topic of Derek Wolfe and Shelby Harris. Now, again, Spot Track has set Harris's value at around $12 million. They don't have one set quite yet for Derek Wolfe, but I'm here to tell you it's going to be dang close. And if you look at Spot Track, I'm not going to do a screen share on this, but where I think Wolfe is probably going to – because he's talked about – he's like, hey, look, I'm willing to listen to the Broncos basically on a team-friendly type of basis, but I don't want to be a sucker. I don't want to be taken advantage of. It has to feel fair. And I think in order for Derek Wolfe – and that's me paraphrasing what he said, but I think in order for him to feel like it's fair, he's going to have to fall somewhere between – $9.5 million per year, Zach, which would put him as somewhere around the 30 to 31st highest paid defensive end / defensive tackle in the NFL, not counting edge, not counting the stand-up pass rusher guys, but actual defensive linemen. And $9.5 million to probably somewhere around $13 million. Now, with Derek Wolfe, you're signing him to maybe 3 years, and the first 2 years are guaranteed, and the third year is a team option type deal. Could you live with paying Derek Wolfe somewhere between 10 to 13 million per year, Zach, on a short-term basis?
I can live with that on the surface, but I want to see what the guarantees are, how it's structured, what the cap hits are. That's what's most important to me. He's no spring chicken, Derek Wolfe, and he's very injury prone. So if they're sky high salary cap hits, that's different. But if it's just 10 a year, manageable salary cap hits, fairly low guarantees for a guy of his age and of his, of injury history, I wouldn't mind it. But other than that, higher than that, you're talking about $11 million. What's another $1 million? Bring back Shelby Harris then. You know what I'm talking about? So 10 for Derek Wolfe versus 12 for Shelby Harris. It all depends on how it's structured to me.
Guys, I want to keep talking about these free agents, but I want to get to some of these comments here and involve you guys in this conversation. The hack Winnie, I'm not sure how you pronounce that, so forgive me, but this is a cool comment. Back then as a child, I used to take 2 buses to get to an expat store in Mexico City to get the Denver Post for my Broncos fix. Now I just tune in to Mile High Huddle and get all the info I need and then some. That's a really cool. That's really cool to us. And also Evan here, he auto-corrected himself later in two comments down.
Nick,
Chad and Zach, he corrected that for letting me become a super chat superstar. Y'all are awesome. I love how interactive you are with the viewers. Keep up the great work and keep rocking the swag. Appreciate that. Now let me get down here to. I don't want to miss anybody here. Bear with us, guys, because the super chats are coming in hot and heavy. Buana Beast, let's grab this because I don't want to lose the comment. He says, what draft pick number would you trade a future first from 2021 for? And which player would you pick up with that additional pick? What draft pick number would you trade a future first from 2021 for?
I'm thoroughly confused with that question.
I'm not sure what you're saying there, buddy. And which player would you pick up? What draft pick number would you? I'm not sure what you're saying there, dog.
Like, which of the 2021 draft picks would the Broncos trade this year? I don't know the question. If you can clarify in the comment section, we'll answer it for sure.
Yeah, circle back on that. Mark jumps in on Super Chat. Appreciate you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
$5 donation. What would the offense look like if you two football priests were in charge? Chad always looks gangster. Zach got the perna cut. Always the perna cut. And you know this, man. What would the offense look like?
Explosive.
It would be definitely explosive, but it would probably try and look a lot like what the Broncos. I'm a big believer in straddling the traditional line of what the tried and true West Coast offense, but in the ways that the new, the cutting edge guys in the NFL have evolved it, like the Kyle Shanahans and the Sean McVays of the world. I think that's what the Broncos are trying to do with Pat Shurmur, utilizing though a lot more spread, which is similar to both those guys. All right, let me scroll to the bottom here. I don't want to miss anybody because these are coming in hot. All right, Dylan on Super Chat, $5 donation. MHH had a collaborative mock draft podcast last year. Are we going to see another one this year? And will it be live? We are planning on doing that again. It's unclear yet exactly whether or not it's going to be live, Dylan. By the way, thank you for the donation. That means a ton. We do plan on doing it, Zach, but I think we are restricted on the platform we use to stream to all our different social media channels. I'm not sure. I think it's 6. It might be less than that. If it is 6, no, I don't want to go out on a limb. I'm not sure exactly how many. I know for sure we can do 3. Above and beyond that, I have to do research. So what that means, though, is worst case scenario, when we produce that podcast, it's going to be worst case scenarios. It'll just be an audio version. It might not be live, Zach, but those are fun. We enjoy doing those.
Yeah, those War Room Roundtable, podcasts are some of my most favorite every year. So we will for sure, I don't know about being live for the reasons that you just laid out, but we will for sure be including the draft guys this year for another Roundtable podcast.
Steven jumps in from the top rope. Big
Thank
time.
you,
Thank
Steve.
you, Steve. That's huge.
That's
$45
amazing.
donation.
Thank
Jeez
you.
Louise. Has Steven been on our list?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to find you.
Our shirt list.
Yeah, I'm going to find you on the email thread that we've communicated on and set something up for the very near future on getting you maybe a hat, Steve, because that's
thank you,
huge,
Steve.
man. We appreciate you.
Yeah.
Let's grab here what Duke is saying on YouTube. What do you guys think about getting Eric Armstead in free agency? Look, here's the thing, Zach. I like Eric Armstead, but you're going to be paying top dollar to get Eric Armstead. And I'm not necessarily opposed to that, but the one thing is for sure, the Broncos, and this was something the Broncos guys touched on, I think it was on yesterday's live pod, but the defensive line is up there as a need right next to cornerback because as high as both of you and I are on Draymond Jones and DeMarcus Walker, they are completely unproven. They've flashed a lot of potential at times, but they are unproven when it comes to being a starter. And meanwhile, the other 3 guys, with the exception of Mike Purcell, even Mike Purcell's a restricted free agent. So your entire starting defensive line is hitting free agency. And in the best case scenario, absolute best case scenario, you're able to get Derek Wolfe and Adam Gotsis, or Shelby Harris and Adam Gotsis. You're not going to get both Derek Wolfe and Shelby Harris back.
Right.
So let's just assume, though, it's Derek Wolfe is a for sure. You can get him back probably, maybe not for sure, but good chance you're getting Derek Wolfe back. You get your middle of the road. I would say Mike Purcell's maybe just a little bit better than a Jag at nose tackle, but still a guy you can count on to start and shut down the run. you still need to solve that other starting position on the defensive line. Now, if you could go out and land an Eric Armstead and get that length and that ability to pass rush, and I would love it, but it's gonna cost you probably about as close to what it would cost to get Chris Jones.
Right, and that's my point. I mean, Eric Armstead is going to be expensive, and if the Broncos are not going to sign Shelby Harris because they want to save money at that position, and if they're not going to care about money, they can just re-sign Shelby Harris for the same price that Armstead would cost. So I don't see him going that route. If anything, they'll bring back Derek Wolfe on a cheaper deal than what either Armstead or Harris will bring, but good player. I don't see him in Denver.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
All right, let's see what we got here. Stu jumps in. As always, so consistent. We love you, Stu. $25 donation.
Thank you.
Thank you, man, and it's good to have you back. It's been a few pods since we've seen you, so we're glad to see you and have you back. Let's see here from Sleek Tro. TPS thinks that the Broncos will win their next Super Bowl by 2030 or later. What do you guys think? What is TPS? That doesn't sound familiar to me.
Something. I don't. I haven't heard of that.
To the notion of the Broncos winning their next Super Bowl by 2030 or later, well, that's 10 years. That's probably fair, to be honest with you. It's fair to put that as the over-under. I think probably 10-year window. Like John Elway was, 15 years into his career before he won a Super Bowl? I mean, he had been to several, but he didn't win one until he was 15 years in. Peyton Manning won one in 2006, so whatever that was, his 8th or 9th season. And then he won it again in 2015. It's going to take time. I mean, the Kansas City Chiefs caught lightning in a bottle with Patrick Mahomes. That's an outlier. And it's not to say that you can't try and, be copycats or hope for similar results, but you're going to get too far out over your skis. It's going to take time for them to build this the organic way. And, John Elway, his contract's up in 2021, at the end of 2021. And so if he decides to pass the baton and, either take a different role with the team or retire and step away from the team. If Drew Lock ends up panning out as the future and franchise quarterback of this team, Elway's legacy will be intact. He brought a Super Bowl to this team as the front office guy, and he found the future that can carry this team to 2030 and beyond. But I think it's fair.
I think it's fair as well. I mean, it doesn't matter who's in charge, who's running the team. If Drew Lock pans out to be the franchise quarterback, they will have multiple Super Bowls by 2030 in the next 10 years. They already have the defense in place to be a championship contender. If that offense can just step up and Drew Lock pans out, they will be in the Super Bowl, I would say, the next 5 years, let alone 10 years. So, yeah, if Drew Lock goes according to plan, the Broncos will have another ring well before the next decade.
Jedi Josh, longtime listener of the show, jumping in, showing some love on Super Chat. Appreciate you, Josh. That means the world to us. He says, given the cap space the Broncos have, I feel a DJ Reader, Eric Armstead, or Jordan Phillips would be more consistent for the scheme. Don't catch you guys much, but I listen at work. You guys still kill it. Yeah. Well, it's good to have you live, brother, and participate in the conversation. That's what's cool about these live pods is we know that there are many thousands of our listeners who can't catch it live and listen after the fact as just a pure podcast. And we appreciate you guys checking that out. But what's cool about the live aspect is you contribute to the conversation. And so we appreciate you doing that, Josh. I like each one of those guys, and I don't disagree with you, Josh, that, they could be more fitting to the scheme. I'm just not sure the Broncos, look, $60 million is a lot of cap space, and that's before you do anything with Flacco, and that's before you do anything with Ron Larry. So maybe I'm being too conservative. But I think Elway is going to try and be a little bit more value-oriented because he's probably a little gun-shy from last year.
I could see that as well, and I'm not a big advocate of spending just to spend, even if the Broncos have excess cap space. I mean, Locke's going to need a contract in a few years. Phillip Lindsay's going to need a contract. Courtland Sutton. They have to put aside some rainy day money, too, to have for the players that are in their own system already, let alone outside players. But Justin Simmons needs a new deal. Derek Wolfe, Shelby Harris, you whittle that down already, then you're down $10 million. So it's not that much money. It's not $150 million in free space. Armstead, too expensive. DJ Reader, a middle-of-the-pack type, I can live with that. But I'd rather the Broncos lock down their own free agents first and then explore the open market.
Really quick, he's not in the comment stream, but Brandon Mingo has reached out many times on Facebook with questions, and I keep telling him, yeah, dude, we'll grab you on the pod. then we get into the live pod, and it's all the live questions from our listeners, and I have totally spaced answering Brandon's questions. So, Brandon, apologies for that. Let's grab these here. He wants to know, Zach, what are your thoughts? He says, I've got a question for the pod. Do you think Peyton Manning would buy the Denver Broncos, or do you think John Elway would buy the team? Zach, before you answer, the one thing that Brandon and any listener or fan of the Broncos might have on that topic is you got to keep in mind that even Peyton Manning, with all the money he made in the NFL, he doesn't have billions. All right, it costs billions to buy an NFL club. So what that would mean is Peyton, like he's tried to do, was he involved in that deal? I might be confusing it, but you become part of an ownership group type deal, and I wouldn't put it past him, Zach. But what are your thoughts?
I mean, even at a percentage, I think it's like, 8% or whatever you need to put down to own a team. That's still, I think, the totality of Peyton Manning's net worth, even with all his money. So I could see him being a front office czar like John Elway, maybe, but I don't see him owning a team. Maybe, like you said, Chad, like a Derek Jeter type where he buys in with another group or whatever. I could see that happening, but Elway, too, he doesn't have the money. I don't think the interest in owning the Broncos. I think he's comfortable with the role he's in right now because you know what? He pretty much owns the Broncos anyway. Without Pat Bowlen in the picture, he runs that organization. So, no, I don't see him as the owner. I don't see Peyton Manning even being a GM in the NFL. I think that's a narrative that is not very in tune with reality. I think Peyton's enjoying his free time. He's enjoying his money and enjoying any opportunity that comes across. I mean, he can do whatever he wants or nothing. It's a matter of preference.
And there are a lot of teams. I mean, credit to John Elway that he has his detractors, but John Elway changed the game for former players stepping in to front office roles without having to climb the ranks as a scout. You know, the Dolphins tried it back in the day with Dan Marino. It was a short-term disaster, didn't work out. He was in and out before you knew it. And so when Elway, if you guys can think back to 2011 when he first came in, Mr. B brought him in, I mean, the NFL outside world was extremely skeptical. Even though Elway had some experience with the Arena League, running a football team and all that, they were extremely skeptical. But the success he had, winning a world championship, it's opened the doors because before that it was Ozzie Newsome. But Ozzie Newsome, he came up through the ranks as a scout, working through the Cleveland Browns and the Baltimore Ravens. So, like, he paid his dues as a front office guy to get to become a football guy, to become a true GM. Whereas Elway stepped in out of kind of left field to take over that operation. And so he opened the doors. And since then, you've seen guys like John Lynch get an opportunity. Peyton Manning, I think he could get almost any job out there he wanted to in a front office if he really wanted it, right. Which tells me that, you know, if he does ever choose to go down that road, Zach, it's going to be with a team that, in my opinion, this isn't me making a bold prediction, it would be either a team that he has a history with, like the Broncos or the Colts.
But I feel like if he wanted to already, he would have done that. I mean, I'm sure the Colts have offered that. There's been rumors spreading ever since he left that organization. He's going to come back in some executive role. I'm sure the Broncos would find a way. I don't know what title he would get with the Broncos, but I'm sure they'd find a way to have him in the front office. He has any job he wants at any time. It's just a matter of wanting that job. And I don't think Peyton Manning is there yet to be back into the NFL that closely where he's in the front office. I think he just likes being Peyton Manning and just having that retirement to do whatever he wants with.
Let's grab Shane here. He says, go Broncos. Hey, guys, finally on here live. Who do you guys want for draft picks? Last year, our weakness was middle linebacker, but we solved that issue. Shane, there's a lot of guys that we like. My focus is in free agency. You're filling holes. You're bolstering the defense. Maybe you're trying to fill some spots on the O-line, whether it's a guy like Joe Thuney from New England. I always Shurmur from Washington. I always space his name off the top of my head. But in the draft, it's all about building that nest around Locke. Even though it's not like their entire draft haul is going to be all offensive guys. In round one, I'm all about grabbing Tristan Wirfs if you can. Yep. I'm all about grabbing in round one. Doesn't necessarily have to be an offensive guy, but a blue chip non-wide receiver. I'm kind of anti grabbing that wide receiver in the first round because there are going to be so many good guys that you can get similar ability early day 2, round 3. Even into round 4 and beyond. So it's all about building that nest. There's a lot of guys we're in love with. I mean, shoot, Isaiah Simmons is a middle linebacker / DB hybrid that you could bring in, and the Queen kid from LSU. There's a lot of interesting players in this class.
Yeah, Christian Fulton's another one. I mean, there's a lot of defensive players the Broncos can go with in round one. And I'm not saying, like Chad said, there's not going to be an entirely offensive dominated draft. I think a lot of mock drafts that have just receiver, running back, tight end, I mean, offensive line, they're going to have some defensive players. But I think, and this is my opinion, the first couple picks should be offense if the Broncos can help it. They need to help out Drew Lock no matter what it takes. Offensive line and wide receiver too. They need to make sure he is built up with the best protection and the best weapons around him. That is how the Broncos are going to compete. We just talked about the Super Bowl, them winning a title. That's contingent on the Broncos offense and contingent on Drew Lock. If they can get that going, they have something.
All right, let's see what we got here from Josh on Super Chat. Thanks, Josh. Appreciate you, bro. Should we not re-sign either one and get someone else? He's talking, of course, about Harris and Wolf, Shelby Harris. That's a fair question. Like maybe neither one is a great option. Maybe you should be just putting all your chips in on an Eric Armstead or a Chris Jones or a couple of the guys, Reader that was mentioned by Josh earlier. I don't think so. However, I think the Broncos, Derek Wolfe is a John Elway guy. He's loyal and you can count on him. And even though he's had some injury issues, coaches love him, players love him, and John Elway loves him some Derek Wolfe. I think they're going to do what they can to get Derek Wolfe back. And then, as far as the other side, they'll probably find a way to spend at the position and see if they can get in on Eric Armstead or if they end up cutting Calais Campbell in Jacksonville or Chris Jones. We'll see how it shakes out, Zach.
I'd be really surprised if the Broncos did not re-sign one of either Harris or Wolf. They can't let the defensive line go that bare with Gotsis being a free agent as well and having no really backups behind him besides Marcus Walker and Draymond Jones. So one of them will return. It's a matter of opinion which one should return, but they're not going to have to face a decision, I think, of losing both those players.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Colton jumps in on Super Chat with the $10 donation. Appreciate you,
Thank
Colton.
you, Colton.
He says, love your pod, boys. Don't stop doing what you're doing. DB.
Never.
For life. We won't. Stu has a question. This was an interesting story. Chris Harris Jr. has retweeted two different stories, outside stories, one from, I believe, NFL Network, one from ESPN, that is predicting him landing with the Chiefs. And naturally fans and media are reading into, why are you doing that, Chris? Do you want to go to Kansas City, or is this you kind of passively, aggressively signaling to the Broncos, hey, there's a demand. Hey, look, I could land to the most hated rival that you have. It's definitely something, though, that he even talked about in that conversation with Rich Eisen back in January, that he thinks he'd be a great fit there. Now, he didn't go overboard in saying, I love the Chiefs, or they are such a good team. I can't wait. I'd love to be there. It's not like that's what he was saying, but when asked point blank, bluntly, what about the Chiefs? He said, yeah, I think I could fit in there. Yeah, no big deal. And then he's retweeting this. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I know he's a big fan of Mahomes, so it makes sense. They just won a Super Bowl, so he's going to try to hop on that bandwagon. I think he thinks that the Chiefs will spend because they need more defensive help. I don't know what his mindset is, but it doesn't surprise me that he wants to maybe stick it to the Broncos as well, Chad, by going to their hated rival. He has obviously acrimony with John Elway, so that's why he might be fanning the flames there. I'd be surprised, though, if they splurge on Chris Harris Jr. They have a lot of decisions to make, starting with Chris Jones in that defense.
Okay, guys, we're running out of time tonight, unfortunately, because we had to start a little bit late, but we're going to grab these remaining Super Chats and then catch you tomorrow for the Mile High Mailbag. Mark jumps back in with a $5 donation on Super Chat. Zach Perna,
thank you, Mark.
Chad has been lying to you. He is a full-time kicker. He kicked a 75-yarder down the pitch. Saw it on Dog Nation. I get that a lot. It started with the MHH dudes, the staffers, saying that I look like, what's his name, Rodrigo. I don't even know the Georgia kicker. I don't even know Blankenship. I think that's what his name is.
He's your doppelganger. You have to know his name, Chad.
I know. See, I don't. But anyway, it's it's a common thing. Google it, you guys. Just Google Georgia kicker, and you tell me if I look like that dude. All right. Jeff Cohen from Twitter jumps in on Super Chat. Appreciate you, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
He says, on Shurmur, he's not excitable, not a wizard offensive mind, is conservative, not a Drew Lock fit. Daniel Jones is like that. Should have kept Scangarello. So Jeff is not high on the Shurmur hire. I'm not sure, about excitable. I'm not sure what you mean by that in terms of his personality or just overall the hire doesn't excite you. I would pick a bone with you, Jeff, on the not an offensive wizard and the whole being conservative. Everything I've studied on him and talking to people and looking at the analytics, I think that doesn't quite line up. But Zach, I think I think Drew Lock. We've talked about this many times since the Shurmur hire was made. I think Drew Lock is extremely fortunate at this point in his career to go from a very inexperienced guy in Rich Scangarello, where basically you're asking Drew Lock to grow with a coordinator who is also himself growing, but now he's being teamed up with two veteran coaches, not only from an X's and O's perspective, but from a teaching technique perspective. This is a perfect storm for him. So, Jeff, that's honestly that's not something I share a brain with you on.
Yeah, Chad, you laid it out perfectly. And you know what? The most exciting part of this whole move is what you mentioned, Drew Lock getting two quarterback whisperers who've been in the game, have skin in the game, and can show results and pull receipts. Scangarello was billed as a quarterback whisperer, quote unquote, but it didn't come out in the wash. You saw what happened last year. I didn't like the move either. I railed against it, but I'm coming around to it because they have experience. If this can help take Lock to the next level, the Broncos had to make that move, and they wouldn't have done it if they did not have faith that Lock could be taken to that next level. So I'm excited. I'm hopeful. I'm a little cautious. I want to see how it plays out, but I like the way the Broncos are trending with experience on their coaching staff.
All right, Terry up in Canada proving once again that Broncos country is not a geographic location, but a state of being. He says, I think Devontae Freeman from the Falcons could help if the Falcons release him. Do we think so? I'm not huge on that. I think he's kind of, with running backs, you got to strike while the iron's hot. And by that, I mean, get them while they're young, while they still got plenty of tread left on those tires. Freeman might still have a little bit left on his, but that's not the guy that I think you bring in to solve all your problems as a complement to Phillip Lindsay, in my opinion.
Right, I'm with you. I think, to me, he has too many miles on his tires, Chad, for a guy who's a runner and a receiver. And he looked last year in Atlanta, he looked completely worn down and broken down. He's only, I think, 28, but he looks like he's playing like he's 35. If there's any veteran impending, free agent the Broncos should go after, it's David Johnson, if only for his pass-catching prowess. But I'd rather the Broncos fill that backup running back slot through the draft. Keep building young instead of blowing money on injury-prone, older veteran players.
Ron jumps in with a $5 donation on Super Chat, becoming one of our superstars on Super Chat. Thank you, Ron. He says, we need an upgrade at ILB. Todd Davis is good, but we need a 3-down thumper. I want to bring in Danny Trevathan and draft one. I even like Joe Schobert. Thoughts? Ron, to be honest with you, when it comes to free agent options, those are the top two in my book. It would be Schobert number one. Don't get me wrong, I love Danny Trevathan, but you got injury history that you got to worry about with him. Those would be the two veteran options for me at the top of the list. But yeah, to me, you grab one of those guys, and you maybe, if depending on what it will cost to get one of these guys, you might end up not picking up Todd Davis's option this year, which would save you $5 million on the cap. But I'm not advocating for the Broncos to do that. But if it's going to take you some coin to grab Schobert, that's might be a decision you have to make. But I'm high on Trevathan. I'm high on Schobert as options for the Broncos in 2020. And grab someone, again, if you have Isaiah Simmons there in the first round, take him and get your wide receiver later on. If you can get Queen later in, trade up back into the back end of the first round or grab him early in the second round, whatever it might be. But both those veteran guys, those are the two that are at the top of my list.
Yeah, as am I. I'm also high on them. Also, Corey Littleton from the Rams, another inside linebacker name that the Broncos could go after. This is actually one position I would not mind the Broncos throwing money at, or a veteran to play next to a young guy in A.J. Johnson. But as Vic Fangio showed last year, he doesn't really put an onus on inside linebacker. The Broncos aren't going to open the checkbook for an inside linebacker. So anyone who wants Shurmur, whatever his name is, probably have to realign their expectations this offseason.
All right, guys, 3 more, starting here with Chase, jumping in on Super Chat. He says, I read about trading for Stephon Diggs. He's connected to Shurmur, and his salary is only $10 million, I believe. What do you think they would want? Minnesota, a second plus a fourth? I think they're going to try to get a first-rounder if they try and deal him. And the reason this is even a question is because he's made some mercurial tweets, and it's been connected since then by some fan blogs, some blogs in the Broncos realm. Connecting the dots, Diggs to Denver. Now you got Shurmur, and the Broncos need a number 2. To me,
I don't like it.
I would rather go into the draft, to be honest with you, than go pay this guy $10 million, especially and giving up the capital it would take to get him. As you say, a second and a fourth rounder. Probably at the second is probably the lowest they'll go for Diggs, a second round pick. And I'm saying I would rather go get a guy like you're probably going to be able to get a Brandon Ayuk from Arizona State in the second round if you're the Broncos, Denzel Mims in the third or fourth round. Like there are some legit guys, and guess what? They don't cost $10 million for the first 4 years they're in the league. They're costing a fraction of that for the entire 4 years, as opposed to the $10 million. So it's not that I don't like Diggs, Zach. It's just I think for where the Broncos are at, they've got their established, dominant number one wideout in Courtland Sutton. Now it's just about getting the complement that can add some dynamic aspects to this offense. And not to say that Diggs couldn't do that, but it's a cost value issue for me.
I'm right there with you. I don't know why this rumor started or why it's continuing to matriculate through Broncos country, but I'd rather, if in a scenario where the Broncos want their number two, I'd rather the Broncos trade those 2 picks, a second and the fourth rounder, for a Jerry Jeudy or for a Ruggs if they want to get that guy, as opposed to trading those picks for a veteran who, like Chad mentioned, the cap hit is astronomical. They're going to have to pay Courtland Sutton soon, so he's not even the receiver the Broncos need in this offense. They need a burner, a true speedy burner. Diggs is more of a possession guy, more of a Courtland Sutton than he is Emmanuel Sanders, to use that kind of comparison. So I don't like this at all. I don't know why this has started, but I'm going to put an end to the Diggs rumor. He is not coming to Denver, and I don't think he should.
Mr. Boggins jumps in on Super Chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boggins.
Gun to your head, who will be the Broncos' first-round pick? One name.
I got 2.
Go first.
One for each position. I think receiver, to me, I'm feeling Ruggs. I don't know why I think that. I just think that he's just high on the Broncos board, and also Wirfs at tackle. I think if he can fall to Denver at 15, they will pull the trigger immediately, get that protector for Drew Lock. So those are 2 names that come to mind, gun to my head, and what's in my intuition right now.
Okay. Again, it's not the way I would do it, but the one other name I would throw in there is Laviska Shenault from Colorado as a likely candidate. But this brings up something Holden is bringing up, Eric's article about the wide receiver evaluation and how Ruggs stacks up. For those of you, is he more of a bust than a hit like Tyreek Hill? What he's getting at is, without recapitulating the entire story, is that there are some analytics, and you can head over to milehighhuddle.com right now and read Eric Trickle's article. There are some analytics out there that would suggest that because, I'm not going to go through all the analytics, but just reason to doubt that Ruggs is going to be that next Tyreek Hill, that he's going to be worthy of a first-round pick, because he didn't post what's called a dominator rating in college. He never got to the threshold of posting a 20 dominator rating. What that means, we're too late in the show to go down that rabbit hole. Go read the article at milehighhuddle.com. All Eric was saying in that is that the Broncos need to factor in that he never, Ruggs, at any point in his college career, accounted for 20% of his team's yards, touchdowns, and receptions, which is a governing metric now, the way teams are evaluating wide receivers. Did you ever have at any point in your collegiate career, did you have a year where your production accounted for 20% of your team's production? And Ruggs never had that. That's all Eric is saying is you got to beware. You got to wonder why that is. Zach, it could simply be a matter of how many mouths there are to feed in the Alabama offense. I mean, you got Jerry Jeudy, you got Smith, you've got great running backs throughout his entire career at Alabama. There's only one football to go around. So you can explain away, and Eric brings that up in his article, you can explain it away, and it could be an outlier, but at the same time, it's all part of the pre-scouting, it's all part of the pre-draft scouting process that you got to factor in and maybe go with someone like that has flashed that dominator rating at a young age in college, like a Laviska Shenault, like even a Jerry Jeudy, and like a CeeDee Lamb, if you want to maximize your odds of hitting on that wide receiver.
I mean, just like I'm not crazy about pro comparisons where like Drew Lock was compared to Patrick Mahomes, let's say. I'm not crazy about comparing a player to a current player and holding that current player's, negative traits against that, the player he's being compared to. I mean, he's his own guy. He's going to be his own guy in the NFL. And we don't know. We're not wizards. We don't have crystal balls. I mean, if we did, we wouldn't be doing the show right now. He's going to be a good pro, but it's a lot to be seen where he goes, how high he goes in the draft and the system he's in, that will determine if he's a bust or not because he's drawn loose comparisons to Tyreek Hill. He's his own player, and we have to let that play out in the NFL.
All right. Last one here from our friend Larry, one of our Super Chat superstars, Broncos fan number 24 on YouTube, with a $20 donation.
Thank you,
Larry. I
Larry.
don't have a question. I just want to help keep the lights on.
Thank you.
Well, that's it. That's exactly what you're doing, brother. We appreciate you so much.
Humbling.
And Christy actually brought up another one of the likely names for first round,
Yes.
Javon Kinlaw.
Great point there.
Don't be
Yes.
shocked. It's a question of will he be there at pick 15. But, guys, thank you for joining us. That's got to do it for today's episode. Sorry, we're at 43 minutes, so it's not like we're cutting it short, but we would continue to go on. If we didn't get your question today, put it as a feather in the cap. Circle back. Tomorrow's the Mile High Mailbag, and we'll get to your questions. I promise you. So stay tuned for that. In the meantime, guys, make sure you're following the show on Twitter at HuddleUpPod. As you know, simply the best way for you to keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening with this show in real time. And then I want to just draw your attention. Obviously, this hat is on my head. You can see that easily. But I just want to show you guys some of the options that are available to you here on the merch store that is created simply by your popular demand. These three on the top are the best sellers so far. On top, and well, the original bestseller is this white T-shirt at the bottom, as you guys know. I'm wearing one right now. But these are the three newest products, and so it's no surprise that they have been the bestseller. But you guys go check that out, HuddleUpPod.com, and get what you want. It's just another great way to support this show. That's got to do it for today's episode of the Huddle Up Podcast. I hit the wrong button there. My apologies, you guys. Thank you for joining us, as always. Make sure you're following also my partner, Zack Kelberman, on Twitter, as you can see here, at Kelberman NFL, myself, at Chad and Jensen. And, Zack, stay safe in New York, or we'll talk again tomorrow night, bro.
I'll try, and my Wi-Fi is starting to cut out, so I apologize for that. But everyone tune in tomorrow, our mailbag time, favorite pod of the week. We'll see you then.
All right, guys. For Zack Kelberman, I'm Chad Jensen. We will talk to you tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Mountain, 8 p.m. Eastern, for this week's Mile High Mailbag. See you then.
You've been listening to the Huddle Up Podcast. Join Broncos Country's deep divers at milehighhuddle.com to keep the conversation going.